Let's start.
Good morning, everyone. So today we'll be studying regarding significance of watershed management in sustainable development. So before this lecture, we have been doing significance of natural resources management and significance of landscape ecology study and management. So after these issues, you must have got a fair idea about what kind of natural resources are existing and what kind of management techniques are required to manage them, so that we can ensure that we take our part towards sustainable development. So just taking a leak in that area, we are now taking up watershed management. So what today we'll be discussing about this outline regarding what is the watershed, how you define a watershed, what are its characteristics, what is the concept and definition, how watershed management can impact local livelihood, and what are the different approaches in India, sectoral approach, integrated approach, then challenges we are facing in watershed management, how human population, policy and planning are being impacted through watershed management, and how our Agenda 21 is connected with and is interrelated with watershed management. So basically, it is a tool in the field of management of natural resources. So watershed is again a natural resource itself. So under natural resources, we had studied that any resource which is occurring naturally and which is living and non-living, or and which can be utilized by human population is called a natural resource. So under that definition, landscape ecology also falls in that definition which we studied yesterday, and watershed management also falls under that definition. So as the name denotes, water plus shed. So when we make a shed, if you have a layman's idea about what a shed is, so shed is basically a shelter, and under shed you can give shelter. Under a shed you can give shelter to your livestock, you can give shelter to all your resources, or you can store your grains, or whatever resource you have, you protect it and you give shelter under a shed. So similarly, this watershed concept was introduced, where we can collaborate all our resources related with land, water, biomass, and with a focus on social, institution, and biophysical aspects. So there are many international and national projects which are going on, especially in developing countries like Asia and Africa, where many marginalized and poor farmers are still there, and they are below the uh, poverty line. So the land has been degraded, and the water resources are now deteriorating in their quality. So there is a struggle to cope up with the diverse era of agroclimatic challenges and market risks. Okay, so there has been recently a global attention to these issues of watershed management, because there is also increasing in the wake of growing water scarcity issues, land degradation issues. So this watershed development program offers you an effective planning and implementation program and activities, which we'll be studying today. So it gives an integrating and holistic development program, and this encompasses all the aspects of agroclimatic zones. Okay, so this unit will be targeted towards objectives of understanding concept of watershed management, analyzing the evolution, how is this concept has evolved over so many years, how there are the different approaches are there, the importance of watershed management and its issues which are related with management in Agenda 21. So it's a synonym. Watershed is basically a synonym for catchment or the basin of a river. Now, if you see a river, you have identified river basins, and you have identified flood plains. So there is the river basin has been predominantly a very old concept, and many civilizations have always tried to get inhabited along the banks of river, be it Harappa civilization or Mohenjo-daro civilization. So many Indus Valley civilizations in earlier times existed along the river banks. So but today we have a catchment area for land also, because if a land is undulating and there is a river basin along that path, or there are large landscapes which have undulated terrain and which can transfer, and the flow of different kind of tributaries and drains from that area passes towards a common area. So that area becomes a catchment area even for the non-river basin areas also. So watershed is basically a single unit where we can cover a large area, and that area naturally drains its streams, rivers, lakes, wetlands, and rainwater to a common point. Okay, so that we can utilize all that channelization, we can utilize all that terrain and all that slope, and one unit is formed so that we can identify and demarcate that unit. So this is a specific land area where all precipitation in terms of rainfall, in terms of snowfall, in terms of groundwater channels, or paleo channels. Paleo channels are river channels which are existing below the groundwater level of rivers. So these paleo channels also interconnect river streams as well as the groundwater aquifers which are existing in an area. And it is also a basin like landform which has high points and ridge lines, and that again descends into elevations and stream valleys. So visually I will show you a diagram how you can identify and how you can visualize. So it has a limited surface area, but it has specific physical properties considering the morphology and hydrology of that area. And considering land and water resources, we have to manage in a watershed management program, we manage them together so that they are not considered an independent entity, but they are considered as a cohesive and collaborative entities. And thus the conservation and management of rainfall becomes very easy when you do a watershed management project, and it becomes it naturally gives you outputs in terms of management of resources of soil as well as water, and thus increasing the crop productivity and increasing the level of human life. Okay, in terms of income, in terms of better crop production, and in terms of better living standards. So this is how we divide a watershed. So you can see there is a slope on one side of the divide and there is a slope on another side of the divide. So this yellow dotted line is a divide, and inside this yellow border you can see all the drains, all the tributaries, all the streams are coming to a common point. Now sometimes there can be a river at the downstream of this divide, and sometimes there can be a catch basin, or sometimes there can be just a groundwater aquifer or a groundwater conservation structure or water conservation structure, surface water conservation structure. There might not be a river at this common point sometimes. So these are basically large areas of undulating terrain or lands, and they contribute their streams and water flows towards one point. So that area which can be demarcated as a unit is called a watershed. Okay, so this is how there are different kind of flows in a watershed like we discussed. There is a precipitation, rainfall is occurring, headwaters are there, wetlands are there, floodplains are there, tributaries are there, then wooded hillside is there, stream bank is there, and then groundwater and water table is there. Okay, so why do we need to study watershed? Because if a watershed concept is implemented any area, it ensures that land fertility, particularly we can ensure food security through increasing land fertility, and we can ensure that sustainable development happens and that watershed ecology is harnessed sustainably. Okay, so there is not over exploitation of resources because we are taking care of all the stream flows, we are taking care of soil conservation practices, we are involving local community in those measures. So all the integrated approaches take us towards watershed ecology management as well as sustainable development. So we can also generate environmental goods and services like regulation of water flows and qualities by construction of dikes, dams, earthen ponds, catchment ponds, then artificial recharge structures are there, trenches are there. So all those goods and services which we generate under watershed project, they help us in developing the area as well as in maintaining the landscape beauty and to avoid the problems of inappropriate watershed management. So when you involve people, the over exploitation stops, the exploitation activities like faulty hillside agriculture practices or slash and burn activities or overgrazing or deforestation, these kind of over exploiting activities, they just stop because people understand what is this project is about, how they have to get involved in the management of resources and in the sustainable utilization of those resources rather than going for exploitation. And then with time, these when these activities are implemented, it helps in increasing the runoff, it reduces the recharge of aquifers and generates seasonal torrents. So the if like it it increases the recharge of aquifers, so the groundwater level which is going down, it comes up because of the conservation of groundwater and because of the conservation structures which have been constructed under the project. And then siltation is reduced as well as lowland fields, they gain better productivity and fertility. So again, considering from global concerns point of view, we need to ensure that world supply of fresh water is limited. Okay, so world's freshwater supply is limited, so what is the option which is left? We have to conserve rain wherever it falls. Okay, so every drop of rainwater that is falling in a watershed, we demarcate that watershed, we demarcate the path of that rainwater, and we ensure that rainwater doesn't goes waste. Okay, it doesn't goes just as flash floods, or it doesn't just causes soil erosion, and it doesn't goes waste in terms of going to drains or stormwater drains. Rather, we ensure that every drop of rainwater that or precipitation that falls in a watershed, it is drained through proper stream channels, flow channels, or it is harnessed through artificial recharge or rainwater harvesting structure and conserved in that watershed unit itself. And gradually it will increase the water level, it will ensure the soil productivity, it will not cause soil erosion. On the contrast, it will help in increasing soil fertility. So these kind of planning, development and management of land, water and biomass resources together with social institutional aspects is called bottom up approach. Okay, so we'll study more about it. So we have to ensure that soil and water conservation goes hand in hand in any watershed development project. So these are the different aspects which are covered in any watershed development project. So land, forest, social system, water, and we have to ensure different measures are there for soil conservation, for forest conservation, for participatory approach, and for ground and surface water management as well as water diversion. So together they help us to prepare a watershed management plan. Okay, and these are the objectives. So when we are in taking care of all these components of land, water, forest, social system, we are able to achieve clean and sufficient drinking water. We are able to create infrastructure, civil structures which help us in harnessing irrigation and help us in our harnessing the water resources in that area. So income and natural resource increases, physical health increases, impact of natural hazards decreases, like floods, especially floods and droughts. So that those kind of natural hazards definitely go 10 times lower in their impact and in the vulnerability of those impacts on the local economy and local people. Then financial management increases, education and self-help increases, and soil and production rates increases. Okay. So watershed management increasingly requires a system approach. You have to consider not every aspect is considered individually, but it has to be considered together as a system. Okay, so if whatever activity you are planning for one component, you have to identify what will be the impacts and how it is going to be connected with other components. Okay, for example, way back in 2003, I did an impact assessment of watershed management projects of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. So in Maharashtra, we went to Satara. So in Satara, there were two watershed management projects which were funded by CAPART, and you must be knowing CAPART and NABARD. These are two important watershed development and watershed management funding agencies. Okay, so they had implemented projects in Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and in many parts of India, but we were given the two projects of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, where we had to do impact analysis of the projects and of the funds which were already given to them 5 years back. So when we went to those locations, the people were already suffering from droughts. Okay, so due to drought kind of situation, they were not even willing to discuss or talk about what was the impact of the project, or and what was like the kind of structures that were created, what was their contribution or participation, because those droughts and those natural hazards are very common to these areas. That was the idea why watershed management was introduced in those areas. But when we went there and after 4 or 5 days there was a rainfall, people were very happy. They could appreciate whatever initiatives were done. And in that scenario, you can talk to people, you can communicate to them, because they are rural people and they are not bothered about what are your project ideas and what are your project objectives. Unless and until their basic livelihood is maintained, they are not going to give you any participation. Okay, so by following this system approach, by ensuring that whatever infrastructure is created, that is being maintained by local people, we ensure that this participatory watershed management continues sustainably even after that funding agency leaves the place, and even after the resources which were introduced in that place, financial resources or the support and the participation by funding agencies, that is like they should, what practice is done today is they do it through in a gradual manner. They do not haphazardly leave those people and leave those communities. So even after the civil works are completed, we keep on lending help to local community for a period of say 6 months or 1 year, till the time we feel that they are independently able to control those facilities and to control the operations in that watershed. Okay, so what are the different characteristics? Now you have seen how soil, forest, water resources, land resources all are involved in watershed management. So these resources have to be discussed in terms of various characteristics like size, shape, physiography, slope, climate. These are 12 characteristics. Okay, so all these 12 characteristics you have to identify, and then you have to study watershed through the lens of these 12 characteristics, so that you have a fair idea, you have a detailed knowledge about what are the different qualities of that watershed, and how you are going to introduce certain facilities, certain infrastructural facilities, certain income and livelihood increasing opportunities, so that we can enhance these characteristics in the watershed. Okay, so the basic knowledge is must. So baseline data related with all these 12 characteristics should be collected before we plan and start any watershed management project. So basically, when we discuss about the size, we have to see how much size is covered in a unit, and if it is a sub watershed, it will be from 100 to 500 square kilometer. If it is a milli watershed, then 10 to 100 square kilometer. Then if it is a micro watershed, 1 to 10 square kilometers. So sometimes happens there is a large area of watershed, and you have demarcated, and within that large area you are demarcating smaller milli and sub watersheds for adequate and improved management. Okay, so this size helps in computing many parameters like precipitation involved, precipitation received and drained off. Then shape of the watershed is also important to consider the parameters like geology and structure. So it is not just the precipitation which is falling from above is important. You have to see how that precipitation is going downwards. What is the rock structure beneath the ground? What kind of recharge structures will help in capturing that precipitation? How we are going to drain that precipitation towards a common channel and towards a common point to ensure that nothing goes waste in that area. Okay, so these shapes may vary from pier, elongated, triangular, circular, and shape length determines the length width ratio. So these characteristics affect the runoff characteristics and runoff time. Okay, so you have to increase runoff time so that more and more water is getting recharged. Okay, then there is physiography. What kind of land is there, altitude, physical disposition, what kind of climate is existing, what activities can be planned for greening, for fodder, for their grazing cattle, what kind of crops or grasses can be grown. Okay, and what then again slope will determine what kind of velocity of overland flow is there, runoff is there, infiltration rate is there, how soil is getting transported, is the soil erosion problem is too high because of the high slope in that area. Then climate, obviously how climate is varying during monsoon season, how climate is varying during winter season, because it's not a 1 month activity or 2 month activity. It has to be planned yearly round. Okay, and then you have to study the drainage pattern, density of drainage, is the density is too high or too low, and if density is high it is easier for infiltration, then infiltration rate is going to be higher. If density is lower, you have to introduce measures which can improve infiltration rates. Okay, and decrease the soil erosion. Then what is the land status? If there are too many private lands, it becomes difficult for introducing such concepts. But if it is there are too many common lands and small plots are there, then also you have to introduce a participatory approach so that people can work together towards maintenance. Okay, and it is always better to involve local people in construction of civil structures which are there, which have been planned for watershed management, like dikes or bunds or anicuts and small check dams. So whatever and artificial recharge structures, trenches or storage ponds. So all those structures should be planned and constructed with the help of local people. So that in that way, we sometimes introduce shramdan. Shramdan is labor donation. Basically, if you translate it in English, it's labor donation. So they work for the project, and they are given a token money for working towards the project. But through that shram dan, or through involving them and through their labor, they feel attachment to that project, they feel a part of that project, and they feel owners for that project, so that they can ensure that they can keep on maintaining and taking care of those infrastructure in future as well. Okay. So again, vegetation, you have to choose the type of grasses and manner in which those grasses have to be grown for reducing soil erosion, and how the plantation, local indigenous species should be grown, so that there is no introduction of exotic species and no invasive species are there. And again, those crops and those trees and those fodder grasses should be beneficial to the local people as well. They should have a value for these plants, so that they keep on deriving that value, and they keep on maintaining them, so that they can have longer periods of benefits. Okay. So again, as I have already explained you, geology and soil is very important. The derivatives of rocks are basically soil, and the soil parameters like depth, nature, moisture in different parts of watershed will help you identify what kind of structures can be built in that particular location or point of that watershed. And again, hydrology has to be improved, so that you can quantify the water that is available, then you can utilize how much is utilizable, how much is required by the local population, how much it can be captured, what is the rainfall that is there, what volume is going to be there in the monsoon period, and how you are going to design different structures as per the volume which is going to fall there, and which structure is going to harness with how much volume of water. Okay, so the total volume that is going to be captured through precipitation has to be accounted through different kind of artificial recharge structures or surface storage or water conservation structures. So again, hydrogeology, water as well as the geology, when they both combine, they form hydrogeology. How the different parameters of water, how the chemical characteristics are impacted by the soil and rock structure, and how the water can be stored in different kinds of rock structures and aquifers and in that watershed. And then socioeconomics, what is the living standard of the people, what is the present income, how that income can be improved, what are the skills skills of people living in that area, what is their education level, if you are introducing some kind of training, whether these people are having enough education for grasping that training and adopting that skill, or whether you have to introduce some higher level skills which is as per their education and skill level. So all those things can be determined only if you are aware of the socioeconomic. So before we start a project, we get a survey done of socioeconomic survey done for the local population, so that we can identify their income level, their problems, their issues. Many a times there are more issues like related with theft and dowry system and alcoholism. So all those issues are also to be identified, so that it can be introduce certain activities which can help in improving that social behavior, because only if social behavior is positive and apt for the project activities, then only project can sustain. So these are different components: forest, valley floor, wetlands, stream, tributaries, groundwater, aquifers. So I'm showing you different images to give you a pictorial view and visual view of the watershed and how different components in a watershed are connected with each other. So what are the approaches? So this is not a new concept. Watershed programs have been there through last 55 years. And there are two main approaches. One is sectoral approach and second is integrated watershed management approach. But most of the projects which are being implemented at present, they fall under integrated watershed management approach because it is more sustainable. and it is more beneficial for a long-term benefit for the project. So this sectoral approach started for particular sectors, because even before watershed management concept was introduced, there were already activities going for soil conservation. So soil and irrigation department was doing their project activities. This water and conservation department was doing their activities, and the women and child development department were doing their activities. So all these departments were acting independently, and they were having a sectoral approach towards the issues they have to tackle. So these most of the watershed management projects which were taken up during 1970s and 1980s in developing countries, they were having sectoral approach, because they felt like we have already different departments for land improvement, for soil and water conservation, for forest management, forest department is there. So all these activities were being done by independently by different sectors for the benefit of their own component. And similarly, Mahaveli scheme in Sri Lanka and Tarbela Dam in Pakistan, these are the oldest example of irrigation projects, and these are largest sectoral approach irrigation projects which were done in 1970s. So when these projects were implemented, this concept was not evolved, integrated approach. But when integrated approach was evolved, it could uh, do away with the drawbacks of sectoral approach. So the sectoral approach has drawbacks, considering its sector specific approach. These could match the national level targets based on their policy and plans for a particular sector only. Okay, so the higher levels where decisions were made were for the allocation of resources for only particular sectors, while other sectors were left behind, and there was not holistic management, and people participation was lagging, and different agencies were doing independently their own activities and utilizing their own funds. So this was the major drawback. But when you see the integrated approach, it started after 1980s, and when in Rio Summit 1992, again Rio Summit comes up. In every major project change, when it goes towards sustainability, there is introduction of Rio Summit. So UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, in 2004, they defined a comprehensive multi-resource management planning process where all resources are taken together. And then this evolved, this concept of watershed management evolved. Okay. So integrated watershed management has benefit to combat all the drawbacks of sectoral approach. It introduces effective local participation. It helps in utilizing traditional knowledge of indigenous technology. So for many times we go to this field and we try to introduce some concept like, okay, this area should have a dike. Okay, so the local people with their local knowledge, they have better methods to construct that dike, which can which doesn't falls away in high level of precipitation, or which stays for a longer period of time, and which utilizes local material for maintenance. Okay, so we as external experts, we also need to understand what are the age old practices which have been going there for long years, and what are the roles of external experts through education of rural community. Okay, that has to be also considered. So in integrated approach, we see how things are being planned and implemented locally, how the issues of gender, caste, religion, and other social barriers, they are also tackled. And the approach is flexible and responsive as per the local scenario and as per the local requirement and demands. So it has to be demand driven activities. It should empower people, and it should definitely give high private income benefits. If there is no economic benefit and there is no income benefit to the local people, after some time their interest in the program will be lost, because these are basically established in rural livelihoods, and already rural livelihoods, they are having major challenges in terms of floods, droughts and lower income from crops, or the kind of cropping patterns that has been introduced that cannot be sustained with the water levels they are having. So if we consider how to improve these structures, we should also take care that, okay, if we are improving soil quality, we are improving productivity, we are improving fertility, then definitely we are going to improve the income of the local people. Okay. So it also helps in benefiting the landless people. So people who are having small plots, or some people who are not having any land and they are just working as labor in these farm areas or local areas. So they should have the ability to pay for different programs through becoming a part of that program. For example, we form water samitis. Okay, तो जब हम वाटर समिति बनाते हैं तो वी मेक दोज पीपल अ पार्ट ऑफ दैट समिति, सो दैट इफ दे डोंट हैव लैंड टू वर्क continuously for a period of 12 months, because due to the lean season or due to the non-cropping season, we have some activity for them. They can participate in the project in a larger manner. Okay, and then if some educated youth is there, we give them more responsibilities related with accounting, related with holding meetings and formation of water samitis. So all those activities become part of the project and help in improvement of the agronomic measures and alternative land use waste systems, as well as harvesting and recycling methods also. Okay. So some of the successful technologies which have been there are horticulture development, organic mulching, check dams, planting of grasses, supplementing irrigation system, then agri-silvi horticulture system, then mushroom cultivation. So all these trainings are also a part of watershed management. So people who are interested in doing mushroom cultivation, they are given skills and training on how to go about it. Some people are interested in making compost out of the kitchen waste that is being generated in the rural households. So that can also be done. So different kind of techniques and project activities are incorporated to ensure longer benefits of the project. So this is again how latest tools like GIS and data and software modeling can help us. So when we improve our in situ observation, starting from the observation system from the bottom of the image, you can see there is in situ observation, satellite remote sensing, airborne remote sensing, hydrometeorological observation network, wireless sensor network. So geophysical physical survey data is there that will give you a fair idea about how much water depth is there, how much water resources are available for harvesting, and what will be the appropriate aquifer where we can recharge. Okay, so sometimes there are shallow aquifers which can be recharged, and those shallow aquifers are connected with the deeper aquifers. So we do not need to recharge completely down to deeper aquifers, because if we construct a structure which goes directly to deeper aquifers, it will be costlier. Okay, so if shallow aquifers are still active, we can recharge to shallow aquifers. And then to do all these services, we need to identify certain watershed modeling tools are there, visual geographic environment, decision support system, and all these facilities which are being offered by latest modeling tools and GIS tools can be very helpful in preparing a management plan for that watershed. Okay, so again, these are GIS approaches for sub watersheds. You can identify stream orders, stream length ratio, bifurcation ratio. So these are all morphological parameters which can be identified, like drainage density, drainage texture, stream frequency. So all these different parameters have different significance in terms of designing of an artificial recharge structure or water conservation structure. So this is an example to show how different stream orders can have different kind of recharge structures. So if it is a first order stream, we can construct a vertical shaft. If it is a second order stream, we can construct a horizontal shaft. And if it is a third order stream in the watershed, then we can construct both horizontal shaft and a check dam to ensure all the water, all the precipitation that is falling in that drainage area gets recharged and is conserved and becomes a part of the underground aquifer system, which can definitely help us in improving soil fertility, soil productivity, and giving us a source of water even during periods of drought. Okay, so such projects have made a dramatic changes in rural livelihoods in Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh. In fact, in Rajasthan also, these projects are being implemented by many local people, and people are now adopting their own villages by forming an institutional framework, by forming a self-help group and doing these activities at their individual level through contribution in their self-help group. Okay, so these are of certain images of certain water conservation harvesting structures like check dams, dikes. This is a recharge shaft. Then this is anecut construction. So all these measures help us in recharging the water in a watershed. So coming to institutional framework, if I have constructed all these structures, if I have introduced different kind of cropping patterns, given training to people on skill enhancement. For example, cycle repairing can be taught, mushroom cultivation, cash crops or exotic vegetable, horticulture, beekeeping, silviculture. So there are many skills which as per the knowledge, as per the interest, as per the demand in that watershed area, we can introduce to these people, and side by side we introduce agricultural practices which are sustainable, like certain crops should be grown on the for this much period only, not before or after the season, so that they demand lesser of water and give higher productivity. So all these things, considering climate change, considering the weather changes, we have introduced in these areas. And when you introduce and you leave that place, then the problem comes. Whatever funds, for example, I have dedicated 40 crores or 30 crores in a watershed project of 325 kilometer in Maharashtra, then that whole funding will go down the drain over a period of 5 to 7 years if nobody is taking care in maintenance, nobody is taking care of sustaining those activities and running those activities for a longer period of time. So when you introduce any project, and you have to side by side introduce some institutional framework. Institutional framework means you have to make some people in charge of different activities. For example, some women groups are made into a self-help group who will take care of activities like fodder for their cattle, how the grasses which have been introduced, their seeds will be bought and they will be grown in a particular season, and how they will be harvested and how they will be sold off to other people who are not a part of the group, so that they can raise their income, and again the local economy is improved, so that local resources can be bought from them only. Okay, so then pickle making, even the papad making, so that the people who are living there, they can support each other and improve their income and improve their, they don't have need to go out of the watershed system to buy some products, and even if they are buying it, they should have enough income to sustain their livelihoods. So making these kind of structures, for example, in India we have national level Ministry of Rural Development is there, then we have state watershed program implementation and review committee, then at district level we have district watershed advisory committee, then district rural development agency, Jilla Parishad is there, even Anganwadi workers, they are also made a part of this program, so that whatever knowledge has been given to them, they can circulate that knowledge, they can motivate people for a longer sustainable benefit. Okay, so these volunteers, watershed committees or Jal Samitis, they help us in ensuring the benefits of the project after the funding agency leaves their hand. Okay. So these are the two bottom up and top down project implementation measures. So when you go for top down management, you start with planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Okay. And when you have to go from bottom up, first you monitor, evaluate, accordingly you plan, design project activities, then you implement, and then you plan for their continuation, for their management and maintenance, even after the funding stops or even after the project implementation agency leaves the project area. So what are the challenges which we observe when we have to implement watershed management projects? So first is human population and second is policy and planning. Okay, so human population, why it is a challenge? Because of the increase in number, because of the ever increasing demand for resources. So that is the main challenge, because that demand is never satisfied. So, but every ecological system has a carrying capacity, how much it can hold, how much it can sustain, and how much it can grow. That depends on the carrying capacity of their environment as well as their resources. So that is limited, that cannot be increased. So that is a challenge. How we have to ensure that the demand does not goes above the carrying capacity. And then we have to find that we are also finding that many at times these people migrate to urban areas to find better opportunities. Then we have to find efficient agricultural technologies to adopt for adoption, for feeding more people. Okay. And then downstream ecosystems have also to be tackled. We have to ensure that if we are giving some benefit to the upstream population, we have to ensure that downstream population is not left out. It has to be also taken care of, and so that the equal amount of water distribution is there, equal amount of resources are available for the downstream population as well. Because most of the times whenever watershed programs are implemented, upstream people are benefited and downstream people are exploited, because most of the water resources which is harnessed or recharged stays in the upstream area and it never goes downstream. So downstream population observes a lack of these resources. So you have to plan in a manner so that equal structures are constructed in upstream as well as downstream, and there is distribution of resources, and all those services have to be equitably allocated. Okay. So when we see policy and planning, we have to ensure that multidisciplinary approach is there, and all the common resources, all the common lands, all the common services, they are allocated equally. And for that purpose, you have to sometimes perform many complex financial assessments like monetary valuation, environmental accounting, what is the benefit and damage assessment, how fair market prices can be introduced, how benefits of specific natural resource policies can be sometimes, like in Forest Act. Earlier, the Forest Act completely restricted cutting of forest, but then participatory forest management was introduced so that local people can help in and participate in forest management for sustainable benefits. And local people can also use forest resources for their own livelihoods. So again, through their participation and through their sustainable efforts. So all those changes keep on being introduced in our policy measures, in our national policies, environment policies, and sectoral resource policies like water conservation and also groundwater policy. So then policy and planning also needs to develop a methodology for accurate future forecast. So if we have taken understanding of cost and benefits of the project, we should ensure that whatever benefits have been forecasted should be accurate. Okay, we should not go over forecasting of benefits or under forecasting of benefits. It should be actual as per the existing resources. Okay. So these are the organizations which are working in the field, like NGOs, self-help groups, government departments are there, international funding agencies are there, and then autonomous bodies like Kapart, Council for Advancement of People's Action and Rural Technology. So when I did this project, I had a privilege of meeting Shri Anna Hazare ji, and we also visited their project in Gujarat, Dahod. So there also large number of watershed management projects were going on, and National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development is also introducing many funding supports for the watershed management projects. And nowadays people like private companies and accredited consultants, they are also becoming a part of watershed management projects. So if you see Agenda 21, it is under UN Conference on Environment and Development, and it has again guidelines for sustainable development. So all those guidelines have watershed management issue as well. Okay, so that chapter 13, some participants are raising hands. So I'll just complete this lecture and then we'll go with the queries. So the chapter 13 of the document extensively focuses on sustainable mountain development. So that also is a part of integrated watershed development and alternative livelihood opportunities. So again, we have to establish a framework for learning for linking all the activities, both arable, non-arable land, to prevent soil erosion, increase biomass production, and maintain ecological balance. So sometimes fish farming can be introduced, shrimp farming, prawn farming, whatever is the demand in that area, as per that, and whatever is the skill, income level of that area, you have to improve it. Okay, so considering that also only, and considering their indigenous knowledge about various activities, you have to enhance that knowledge, you have to empower them, so that the impacts of natural disasters, especially like floods or droughts, is mitigated, and their risk zoning can be done, and early warning systems can be employed. Okay, so all these things were already part of Agenda 21, which were re-emphasized for watershed management. Okay, so that's why watershed management is very much an essence, in essence of sustainable development, is a part of Agenda 21. So again, large number of watershed management were introduced after the concept of Agenda 21 came up, and this World Summit on Sustainable Development and the International Years of Mountains and Fresh Water, they also propagated different approaches for watershed management. So this was all about watershed management, and if you have any questions. Yeah. So I had seen few hands. Yeah, Mr. Das Gupta. Yeah, please.
Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You have very nicely avoided the main part of socioeconomic problems I see that we get into, and you've worked with the government. So you will know that, let's say Maharashtra, where you have worked. Okay, Baramati is an area which belongs to a very popular politician. In fact, all of Maharashtra say belong to him. But that apart, you know, the problem with sugarcane farming, okay, and as you will know that it is very